Hi everyone. End of week 3. I thought I'd do this outdoors because it's such a nice day. So the brick wall behind me is my house, and I can hear squirrels eating things in the garden. Which I don't know if you can hear that um, on the recording. Anyway, thanks to Elizabeth and Tina for moderating this week. And I thought people added some very good suggestions for instructional ideas here to this Google Doc. And generally, everybody was very focused on thinking about the implications of the ideas that we've been reading for classroom teaching contexts. I always like the building and borrowing article because I think it really does point out some realities about and raise some important sort of things for us to think about as how students incorporate understanding from their instructional experiences. And I think the challenge is, and people talked about it a lot this week, is that while these new models come up, people felt that a lot of students, both young ones and adults, have a rather narrow kind of expectation about what their role is in educational settings. They tend to be mark-oriented, driven by external rewards, not really engaged, and more focused on arriving at the answer rather than really figuring out, what's an interesting problem or how we might proceed on there. And I was thinking that perhaps the Google world, with information at our fingertips, has unwittingly pushed us towards kind of this rapid expectation of answers suddenly, and that maybe this is pushing us towards a more superficial understanding of ideas. And even though Google gives us facts, facts aren't what schooling is about, right? I mean, it's what you do with the facts and how you integrate them. But that kind of surface level engagement does characterize a fair amount of social networking activity in our sort of culture, and somewhat it gets to be this kind of task. It gets fed into this task orientation that we sometimes see in schools, where everything is about finishing a task or doing another task, and we're not really focused on the learning. So I'm wondering if that isn't part of the attitude that we might see in the classroom now, and I think it comes in conjunction with the prevailing teacher-led models of school that many students experience in our teaching system, our education system. Someone mentioned squashing questions, and I think that really describes much of my own children's school experiences, and never mind what my school experiences were, even though it was all those centuries ago. It was like seemed to be totally that. And I was thinking too that we haven't got the whole generational change yet that went from start to finish in a more instructional educational context. So that would need the students, the teachers, and the administrators to have all gone through this. So I'm wondering if that's before it becomes a kind of prevailing norm but throughout the system. So that's going to take us another few years to get to that place. Now, another thing I wanted to talk about, there's so many things I could talk about, and I don't want to make these videos really long because they get, it's not what this is about. But I did want to talk about using psychological theories as instructional blueprints. Every year, people raise these issues: learning styles, brain-based learning, and Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. And they use them as rationales for organizing instruction in particular ways. And I've got a long background in the area of cognitive psychology and the learning sciences generally. And I've watched the evolution of this transformation, and I know these are compelling ideas, and it's very tempting to incorporate them wholesale into classroom settings, classroom applications. But I'm going to offer you today a way of thinking about the difference between the models and concepts that have been developed through research as ways of deepening our understanding about learning, and those and the sort of the subtle shifts in those ideas that have been focused on helping us develop better teaching practices that really didn't arise out of the research. They're kind of overextensions. So there's lots of workshops. We have them on brain-based education, multiple intelligences, learning styles. This is quite common in the educational world because those ideas have really been appropriated. But if you look at the actual research in any one of these areas, it's got nothing to do with teaching. The learning styles research, for instance, has been done largely in adult ed contexts, and there's a research finding that this division doesn't hold up consistently across groups. we know that from, there's been 50 plus years of learning sciences research, and we know that people adapt their approach to learning depending on their age, the task, the context, the expectations of the teacher, what the norms are in that learning environment. And we know that people learn different things from different kinds of materials. So the valuable insight, instructional insight we could take from this research is that offering our research in multiple modalities allows us, A, to notice different aspects of that knowledge as it's presented in different ways. Like you see a video of something that you've read and you think, oh, yeah, that is an important point. I didn't really recognize that when I was reading, but now you present it this way, I see this aspect of it. And secondly, it increases the amount of time we're being exposed to that idea. And that's one of the most prevalent research findings across everything is time on task. More time on task, more learning. Now, it's not always simple like that because, in fact, what you do while you're having that time on task is also important. But we are increasing instructional time by offering the same information in different modalities. It gives us an opportunity to learn it better. So it's important to kind of understand that. But one of the instructional strategies that comes out of this learning styles research is that are these school interpretations, and the take on it, the simplistic take on it, is that we as teachers need to vary the kind of material and the forms we offer it in so as to reach more learners. Now that is a very similar sounding outcome to the claim that we need to offer material through multiple modalities. The difference is the rationale. So the learning styles rationale is that we do this because we each learn better in one modality than the other. So we need to offer multiple modalities in which to reach more students. So we end up in a roughly similar practical place, but the psychological and learning premise upon which those ideas are based is quite inaccurate in the learning styles literature. But I want you to appreciate that difference. It's a huge one in terms of research in explanatory terms when we're trying to understand how things work. And it's a misappropriation to make those instructional inferences so superficially. And it's not that people have done this with bad intent. I understand how that happens. It's more enthusiasm, actually. It's like, wow, that sounds like a great idea. Let's do this. And then suddenly you've got a whole generation of activities that have come out of this but it's not based on a deep understanding of the literature. So, and I've worked extensively with students with learning and problems of varying kinds over the years, and I've only really encountered one student who's truly an auditory learner. And he was only an auditory learner because he couldn't learn visually. His visual processing had certain problems, quite significant ones. For instance, he couldn't interpret a graph when he saw it. Like, it was just like things moving around on a page. He just couldn't do it. And it took him ages to deconstruct written sentences. So he was trying to go to university. So what we did was turn all of his work into auditory. He recorded everything, and then he made notes he used Dragon, naturally speaking, but it took him, he practiced he used strategies to organize his material. And I gave him metacognitive strategies to use. I worked them out with him to help him deconstruct graphs. He graduated with an A average in the end. He worked really hard at trying to kind of cope with this. But that is what somebody who really has a preference for auditory processing looks like. Not the rest of us can deal well in all ones. But we might, in certain situations, prefer one over the other. Or we feel more comfortable with one because that's the one we used in school all the time. Because school also sort of orients us towards visual things. We all need to apply ideas. So to say that, some people really need to have hands-on experience is silly. We all need hands-on experience. Nothing becomes real to us unless we apply it to something, in a practical sense. How we do that, as we become more sophisticated as learners, graduate students, that would be a good example, you get very good at using, at being able to make abstract ideas more real, but you've had a lot of practice. So I think we have to be very careful where we use learning styles. So I'm going to do another quick one on Howard Gardner's misappropriation of, not his, other people's misappropriation of multiple intelligences. I think he got pretty freaked out about this actually some years ago, but I think he's got used to it now. What he was doing was trying to come up with a new theory of intelligence. We'd had very narrow conceptions of intelligence before that. We'd thought of it as a two-factor theory, general intelligence and verbal intelligence, or verbal and quantitative, but we kept kind of rotating around there. So there were lots of different theories that came out over the years, but they had a very narrow conceptualization of that. His research suggested that people are actually able to show tremendous skill and variety and capacity in all different kinds of learning, musical, spatial, and so forth, not just verbal and numerical. And so that had, so his ideas there sort of took us out of a blinkered way of looking and thinking about intelligence. But he didn't suggest that therefore we should all start teaching in using different modalities. That's not the logical consequence of that research. It's like learning styles. His theory was appropriated to say that people learn in different ways, have different strengths, and so we need to teach to those strengths directly. But there's no research evidence saying such an approach works, because we don't have good ways to identify people, and we don't actually have this. I'm not somebody who only learns spatially, or I'm only good at learning through music. I may have a talent with music, but it doesn't mean I can't do a whole bunch of other things. So again, it's a misunderstanding of the reason for the multiple intelligences position. So I'm not going to go on about this. I might give you a little one of these things on brain-based learning later in the term, because that's the third area that I think has really been taken up. And again, it's not that it's wrong. It's just that the rationale for why we arrive at these ideas is taken too far and overextended and not based on research. So, but that being said, I think there were some very good discussions this week, and I'm very happy with the work you're doing and the kind of focus that you're developing on all these different ideas. And as we go through, it's very slow, my internet here, we're starting social and cultural influences on learning theories, and Eckhart and Madeline Schumann are going to lead us this week. And our focus is particularly on Vygotsky, who is really the prime mover of our thinking about social influences on learning and why that really, how that really works. So, and again, these readings are older, they're more seminal ones, but they will help ground the current ideas in the conceptualizations that really deeply influence this gradual movement that we've had in the last sort of 50 years towards constructivism and how we've arrived at that. So I look forward to your participation this week, and good job. On we go. And I'll talk to you soon. If I can do this, there we are. Okay, have a great week.